The year was 324. Constantine stood victorious. The Roman Empire had seen many emperors rise and fall, but this one was different. He gazed eastward from the ancient Greek city of Byzantine. The Bosphorus stretched before him. Europe met Asia here. The waters sparkled in the morning sun. Ships passed through this narrow strait. They carried goods from distant lands, spices from India, silk from China, grain from Egypt. This spot commanded everything. Constantine understood geography, he understood power. Rome had grown old. The Eternal City sat far from the empire's real challenges. The Persian frontier demanded attention. The Danube frontier needed watching. Egypt fed the empire, Syria enriched it. All of these lay in the east. Rome looked backward. Constantine looked forward. The emperor walked through Byzantine streets. The city was already ancient when he arrived. Greek colonists had founded it nearly 1,000 years before. They named it after their leader, Byzos. The walls were strong. The harbours were deep. The position was perfect. 7 hills rose from the shoreline. Just like Rome, but this would be a new Rome. A better Rome. A Christian Rome. Constantine began to dream, not just of a city, of an empire reborn. The old gods were fading. Christianity was rising. At the Milvian Bridge he had seen a vision, a cross in the sky. By this sign, conquer. He had conquered. Now he would build. Not just buildings, a whole new world. The construction began in 324. It was unlike anything the world had seen. Thousands of workers arrived. Architects from across the empire, sculptors from Athens, engineers from Syria. They worked day and night. The emperor himself marked out the boundaries. He walked with a spear in hand. Where he walked, the walls would rise. When courtiers suggested the circuit was too large, Constantine replied simply, "I shall advance till he, the invisible guide who marches before me, thinks proper to stop." The old city disappeared beneath the new. Massive walls rose from the sea. The hippodrome took shape. It would hold 100,000 people. Chariot races would thunder here. The people would cheer. Politics would unfold in those cheers. The blues and greens, the racing factions, would become political forces, but that was still to come. The Forum of Constantine emerged as the city's heart, a great circular plaza. At its centre stood a column, 120 feet tall, purple porphyry stone from Egypt. At its top, a statue, Constantine himself as Apollo, or was it Christ? The ambiguity was deliberate. The empire was changing. Not everyone was ready. Churches rose alongside the forums. The Church of the Holy Apostles began construction. Constantine planned his own tomb there. He would rest among the 12 apostles, not as the 13th, as the equal of the 12. Some called this hubris. Constantine called it destiny. The imperial palace sprawled along the shore. Room after room, hall after hall, gardens descended to the sea. The emperor could step from his chambers onto a ship. He could sail to Asia in minutes, or to Europe. He commanded both. The palace was not just a residence. It was the empire's nerve centre. Here, decisions would shape the world for 1,000 years. But a city needs people. Constantine solved this with typical directness. He ordered senators to build houses. He offered free grain to new residents. Artisans received tax breaks. Merchants got preferential treatment. The population swelled. Within a generation, it would rival Rome itself. May 11, 330. The dedication day arrived. The ceremonies lasted 40 days. Pagan rites mixed with Christian prayers. The emperor wanted everyone included, at least for now. The statue of Constantine was paraded through the streets. Beneath it, in a secret chamber, lay relics. The axe Noah used to build the ark, the rock Moses struck for water. Crumbs from the loaves Christ multiplied, fragments of the true cross, legend mixed with faith, faith mixed with power. Constantinople was born. But it was more than a city. It was an idea, the idea that empire could renew itself, that Rome could be reborn, that East and West could unite, that Christianity could rule an empire. These ideas would be tested, they would bend, sometimes they would break, but they would endure for more than a millennium. The senators who moved from Rome complained at first. The new city lacked amenities. The baths were not as grand. The libraries were smaller. But Constantine was building these too. The University of Constantinople would soon rival any centre of learning. The cisterns would store millions of gallons of water. The aqueducts would stretch for miles. This was not a provincial capital. This was the new Rome. Constantine ruled from his new city for 7 years. He reformed the government. He separated civil and military authority. He created new titles: the Master of Offices, the Count of Sacred Largesses, the Praetorian Prefects. These positions would evolve. They would become uniquely Byzantine, but the foundations were laid here. Now. The emperor also wrestled with Christianity's growth. The Council of Nicaea had met in 325. Constantine presided. The nature of Christ was debated. Was he equal to God the Father? Was he subordinate? The council decided for equality. The Nicene Creed was born, but the debates did not end. They had just begun. These theological arguments would shape Byzantine politics for centuries. Constantine's sons watched and learned. Constantine II, Constantius II, and Constans. They would inherit the empire. They would fight over it. The unity their father imposed would fracture, but Constantinople would endure. It had been built to last. The economy of the new capital flourished immediately. Ships arrived daily. The harbours never slept. Egyptian grain fed the population. Syrian craftsmen produced luxury goods. Anatolian farmers supplied produce. The city became a vast marketplace, but also a workshop. Silk weaving would arrive later, but already the foundations of Byzantine industry were forming. The Mint of Constantinople began producing gold coins, the solidus. It would become the dollar of the medieval world, stable, trusted, desired from Britain to India. For 700 years, it would barely change. This monetary stability would be a Byzantine hallmark. When other economies collapsed, Constantinople's endured. Constantine died in 337. He had ruled for 31 years, the longest reign since Augustus. On his deathbed, he finally accepted baptism. He had delayed it, believing baptism washed away all sins. He wanted that washing at the very end, pragmatic to the last. His body was brought to Constantinople. The funeral procession stretched for miles. He was laid in the Church of the Holy Apostles, the first emperor to rest in the city he created. He would not be the last. Generations of emperors would join him, until the church fell to Ottoman canons. But that was more than 1,000 years away. The city mourned, but it also looked forward. Constantinople was no longer just Constantine's city. It was becoming its own entity, with its own character, its own destiny. The senators who had grumbled about moving from Rome now wouldn't leave. Their children were learning Greek. The future was here, not in the West. The empire Constantine left was vast, from Britain to Mesopotamia, from the Danube to the Sahara. But it was also changing. The West was becoming poorer. The East was becoming richer. The army was becoming more defensive. The barbarians were becoming more aggressive. Christianity was becoming dominant, but also divided. These challenges would define the Byzantine Empire. How to preserve Roman law while adapting to new realities. How to maintain Greek culture while ruling diverse peoples. How to defend vast frontiers with limited resources. How to balance church and state. How to be Roman without Rome. Constantine had not solved these problems, but he had created a framework for solving them. A capital positioned perfectly, a government structured for efficiency, a religion that could unite the empire, a currency that could sustain trade. These tools would be refined, improved, sometimes abandoned and then recovered. But they began here, in Constantinople, in the 330s. The city's growth continued after Constantine's death. His sons added new districts. New walls were needed within a generation. The population reached 500,000 by 400. It would peak at nearly 1,000,000. No European city would match it for 1,000 years. The character of Constantinople was unique from the start. It was a planned city, not organic like Rome. Every district had a purpose. The imperial district for government, the commercial district for trade, the industrial district for production. This planning created efficiency, but also beauty. Wide streets, open plazas, public fountains, gardens everywhere. The social structure was also distinctive. The Senate existed, but it was different from Rome's. These senators were often self-made men, successful generals, wealthy merchants, skilled administrators. Merit mattered more than ancient bloodlines. This mobility would characterize Byzantine society. A peasant could become emperor. Several did. The role of women in Constantinople surprised visitors. They owned property. They ran businesses. They influenced politics. Empresses would rule in their own right, not just as regents, as emperors. The word emperor in Greek, basileus, had no gender. This linguistic quirk reflected social reality. Education flourished from the beginning. Constantine established schools. His successors expanded them. Literacy rates were higher than anywhere in Europe, not just among elites. Merchants needed to read contracts. Craftsmen needed to read plans. Soldiers needed to read orders. This widespread literacy preserved classical knowledge through the dark centuries ahead. The legal system evolved rapidly. Roman law was preserved but adapted. Greek concepts influenced procedure. Christian ethics influenced judgments. The death penalty became rarer. Mutilation replaced it. This seems cruel to modernize. Byzantine saw it as merciful. A blinded rival could not rule, but he could live. He could pray. He could find salvation. Constantinople's walls would become legendary. Not just the outer walls, the sea walls too, and the great chain across the Golden Horn. This chain could close the harbour. Enemy ships would crash against it. The city would be besieged dozens of times. It would fall only twice, once to fellow Christians, once to the Ottomans. The walls Constantine began would protect his city for 11 centuries. The year 527 brought a new emperor to Constantinople's throne. Justinian was not born to rule. His uncle Justin had been a peasant, a soldier who couldn't read. But Justin rose through the ranks. He became emperor almost by accident, and he prepared his nephew carefully. Justinian could read, in Latin and Greek. He understood law. He understood theology. Most importantly, he understood ambition. Justinian dreamed of restoration. The Western Empire had fallen 50 years earlier. Barbarian kings ruled Italy, Africa, and Spain. They claimed to be Roman successors. Justinian knew better. He was the only true Roman emperor. The West belonged to him. He would take it back. But first, he nearly lost everything. The year 532 brought crisis. The racing factions rioted. Blues and Greens united. This never happened. They shouted, "Nika!" victory. They burned the city centre. The Church of Holy Wisdom collapsed in flames. The palace was besieged. Senators proclaimed a new emperor. Justinian prepared to flee. Then Theodora spoke. The empress was remarkable, a former actress. Actresses were barely above prostitutes in social standing. But Justinian had changed the law to marry her. Now she saved his throne. "Purple makes a fine shroud," she said. "An emperor should die as an emperor, not live as an exile." Justinian stayed. The general Belisarius acted. With 3,000 men he entered the hippodrome. 30,000 rioters were trapped inside. The doors were barred. The killing began. By sunset the rebellion was over. The hippodrome's sand was soaked with blood. But Justinian survived. Now he could build. The new Church of Holy Wisdom rose from the ashes, Hagia Sophia. It would be the world's largest building for 1,000 years. The dome seemed to float on air. Light poured through 40 windows at its base. Gold mosaics caught that light. They threw it back transformed. Visitors fell to their knees. They thought they had entered heaven. The architects were Anthemius and Isidore, a mathematician and a physicist, not traditional builders. Justinian wanted innovation. He got it. The dome was an engineering miracle. It would collapse once, be rebuilt stronger, survive earthquakes that leveled the city, stand for 15 centuries. Even today it amazes. But Justinian built more than churches. The entire legal system was reconstructed. Roman law had accumulated for 1,000 years. Contradictions abounded. Interpretations varied. Justinian ordered a compilation, the Corpus Juris Civilis, the body of civil law. It would become the foundation of European legal systems. Canon law, civil law, even common law borrowed from it. The work took 5 years. Tribonian led the effort. The finest legal minds participated. They condensed 3 million lines of law to 50,000. They resolved contradictions. They updated obsolete provisions. They created something new while preserving something ancient. This was the Byzantine way. Innovation through preservation. Meanwhile, Belisarius sailed west. The reconquest began. Vandal Africa fell first. 100 years earlier, the Vandals had been unstoppable. They had sacked Rome itself. Now Belisarius destroyed them in 2 battles. Carthage was Roman again. The grain supplies were secured, the treasury filled with Vandal gold. Italy came next. The Ostrogoths ruled there. They claimed to preserve Roman ways. Justinian disagreed. Belisarius landed with 7,000 men. It seemed impossible. Italy had millions of inhabitants. The Goths had tens of thousands of warriors, but Belisarius was perhaps history's greatest tactical genius. He took Naples through an aqueduct. The soldiers crawled through the water channel at night. The city woke to Byzantine troops in its streets. Rome fell without a battle. The Pope welcomed Belisarius. The Eternal City was Roman again, but the Goths counterattacked. The siege of Rome lasted a year. Belisarius held with just 5,000 men against 50,000. The war dragged on. Italy was devastated. Cities changed hands repeatedly. The population plummeted. Plague arrived from the east. Justinian himself nearly died from it. Theodora did die. Not from plague. From cancer. The emperor never remarried. He ruled alone for 17 more years, increasingly isolated, increasingly obsessed with theology. But the conquest continued. Southern Spain was taken. The Mediterranean was almost a Roman lake again. But at what cost? The treasury was empty. The army was exhausted. The Persians attacked in the east. The Balkans were overrun by Slavs. The reconquest was magnificent. It was also unsustainable. Justinian's reign lasted 38 years. He transformed Constantinople. Besides Hagia Sophia, he built 25 churches. The city's cisterns were expanded. The basilica cistern could hold 21 million gallons. Its columns were recycled from pagan temples. The old gods now held up water for the new faith. The palace grew under Justinian. New throne rooms, new reception halls. The Chrysotriklinos, the Golden Hall, became the ceremonial heart. Here, foreign ambassadors were awed. Mechanical lions roared. Mechanical birds sang. The throne itself could rise toward the ceiling. The emperor would ascend like a god. This was not mere vanity. It was calculated propaganda. The silk industry was established during Justinian's reign. Monks smuggled silkworm eggs from China. They hid them in hollow walking sticks. Constantinople began producing silk. The imperial monopoly generated enormous wealth. Purple silk became the ultimate status symbol. Only the imperial family could wear it. To be born in the purple meant born to rule. Trade flourished despite the wars, or perhaps because of them. The conquered territories were integrated into Constantinople's network. African grain, Italian wine, Spanish oil, Egyptian papyrus, Syrian glass, all flowed to the capital. The city's markets offered goods from India to Ireland. The population reached its peak under Justinian. Perhaps 800,000 people, maybe more. The city walls enclosed 7 hills, but suburbs sprawled beyond, across the Bosphorus into Asia, up the Golden Horn, along the Sea of Marmara. Greater Constantinople was the world's largest city, but success brought problems. The plague of 542 killed perhaps a third of the population. It returned every generation for 2 centuries. The economy struggled to recover. Labour was scarce. Prices rose. Taxes increased to pay for wars. The people grumbled, but they endured. Justinian's religious policies created lasting divisions. He tried to reconcile Orthodox and monophysite Christians. The monophysites believed Christ had one nature, divine only. The Orthodox believed in 2 natures, divine and human. The dispute seems arcane now. Then it split the empire. Egypt and Syria leaned monophysite. Constantinople was Orthodox. Justinian's compromises satisfied no one. The emperor's own theology grew increasingly complex. He wrote treatises. He called councils. He condemned dead theologians. The Pope refused to comply. Justinian had him arrested, brought to Constantinople, held under house arrest. The Western Church was outraged. The seeds of the Great Schism were planted. Education flourished under Justinian. The University of Constantinople was expanded. Law schools were established. Medical training was formalized. The liberal arts were taught systematically. Grammar, rhetoric, philosophy, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, music. This curriculum would be preserved through the Middle Ages. But Justinian also closed the Academy of Athens. Plato's school had operated for 900 years. It was too pagan for the Christian emperor. The philosophers fled to Persia. Some returned later. But something was lost. The direct link to classical philosophy was severed. The role of women in Justinian's era was complex. Theodora had been powerful. She influenced laws protecting women. Prostitutes could leave their profession. Wives could divorce abusive husbands. Women could own property more easily. But after Theodora's death, these reforms were sometimes reversed. The economy under Justinian was sophisticated. Banking systems operated across the empire. Letters of credit replaced physical gold for large transactions. Insurance existed for ship cargoes. Joint stock companies funded large ventures. This was capitalism before capitalism. But it was also regulated. Price controls, quality standards, guild monopolies. The military under Justinian evolved significantly. The old legions were gone, replaced by smaller, more mobile units. Cavalry became more important, especially armoured cavalry. The cataphracts, both horse and rider, wore mail. They were tanks of their era, but expensive. A single cataphract's equipment cost as much as a small farm. Belisarius revolutionized tactics, combined arms operations, infantry, cavalry and archers working together, feigned retreats, night attacks, psychological warfare. He won battles outnumbered 5-1. His victories seemed miraculous. Some credited divine intervention, others credited genius. Both were probably right. But Belisarius fell from favour. Justinian grew suspicious. Too many victories. Too much popularity. The general was recalled, tried for treason, acquitted but ruined. Legend says he ended as a blind beggar. That's false. But he did die in obscurity. The empire's greatest general discarded. Narses replaced Belisarius in Italy, a eunuch, 70 years old, but brilliant. He completed the reconquest. The Ostrogoths were eliminated. Italy was Roman again, briefly. The Lombards would invade 3 years after Justinian's death. Most of Italy would be lost. The reconquest would prove ephemeral. Justinian died in 565. He was 82. He had ruled longer than any emperor since Augustus. He left an empire larger than any since Theodosius, but also weaker. The treasury was empty. The army was overstretched. The population was reduced by plague. The religious divisions were deeper. Yet Justinian also left treasures: Hagia Sophia, the Corpus Juris Civilis, a tradition of learning, a sophisticated administration, a vision of universal empire. These would endure. They would define Byzantine civilization. They would influence the world for centuries. Justinian's successors inherited an exhausted empire. Justin II, his nephew, faced immediate crisis. The Lombards invaded Italy in 568. The Avars demanded higher tribute. The Persians resumed war. The treasury was empty. Justin went mad. Literally, he would bite courtiers. He demanded to be pulled around the palace in a wheeled throne while organ music played. His wife Sophia ruled in his name. Tiberius Constantine succeeded in 578. A good soldier, a decent man. But the problems were overwhelming. Italy crumbled. The Balkans were overrun. The Persian War expanded. He spent what little money remained on defence. It wasn't enough. He died, leaving the empire in deeper crisis. Maurice took the throne in 582. He was competent, perhaps even brilliant, but he was also cheap. The army hadn't been paid in months. When he ordered them to winter beyond the Danube to save supply costs, they revolted. A centurion named Phocas led them. Maurice fled. He was caught. His 5 sons were executed before his eyes. Then he was beheaded. The year was 602. Phocas proved a disaster. He was paranoid, brutal, incompetent. The Persians seized the opportunity. They took Syria. They took Egypt. They took Anatolia. They reached the Bosphorus. Constantinople could see their campfires across the water. The empire seemed finished. Then Heraclius arrived, the son of the governor of Africa. He sailed to Constantinople in 610. Phocas was overthrown, executed. His body burned in the Forum of the Ox. But Heraclius inherited catastrophe. The Persians held half the empire. The Avars besieged Constantinople. There was no money, no army, no hope. Heraclius considered abandoning Constantinople, moving the capital to Carthage. The patriarch Sergius convinced him to stay. The church's wealth was offered. Gold crosses were melted, silver chalices became coins. An army was rebuilt. But it would take time. The year 614 brought horror. Jerusalem fell to the Persians. The true cross was carried off. Churches were burned. Christians were massacred or enslaved. The psychological blow was enormous. If God allowed this, was the empire doomed? Some thought the end times had arrived. Constantinople itself was besieged in 626. Persians from the east, Avars from the west, Slavs from the north. The city was surrounded, but the walls held. The navy controlled the Bosphorus. The Persians and Avars couldn't coordinate. The siege failed. The city attributed survival to the Virgin Mary. Her icon had been paraded on the walls. She had protected her city. Meanwhile, Heraclius had done something unprecedented. He abandoned Constantinople to defend itself. He took the army east, not to fight the Persians in Roman territory, but to invade Persia itself. It was insane, or genius, maybe both. The campaign lasted 6 years. Heraclius marched through Anatolia, through Armenia, into Mesopotamia. He won battle after battle, not through superior numbers, through superior tactics and determination. The Persians were stunned. No Roman army had penetrated so deep in centuries. In 627 at Nineveh, the decisive battle was fought. Heraclius personally killed 3 Persian generals in combat. The Persian army collapsed. The Shah was overthrown by his own nobles. The new Shah sued for peace. All conquered territories were returned. The true cross was recovered. Heraclius entered Jerusalem in triumph in 630. The empire was restored. Heraclius was hailed as new Alexander. But the victory was hollow. Both empires were exhausted. The wars had lasted 26 years. Entire provinces were depopulated. Cities lay in ruins, and in Arabia something new was stirring. Muhammad had died in 632. His successors looked north. They saw 2 exhausted empires. In 634, Arab armies entered Syria. Heraclius sent forces to stop them. At Yarmouk in 637, the Byzantine army was annihilated. Syria was lost. Jerusalem fell again in 637, this time forever. Egypt fell in 641. The breadbasket of the empire, gone. Africa held out longer, but it too would fall. Within a century of Heraclius's death, the empire lost 2/3 of its territory. The Mediterranean Empire became an Anatolian state, but it survived. That was the Byzantine genius, survival against impossible odds. The Arab conquests were unlike anything before. The Persians had wanted tribute. The Arabs wanted conversion, or at least submission. Christians could keep their faith, but they paid extra taxes. Many converted, especially in Syria and Egypt, where monophysite Christianity had been persecuted by Constantinople. The empire had to adapt. The old provincial system collapsed. The theme system replaced it. Military districts. The commander was both general and governor. Soldiers were given land. They farmed in peace, fought in war. It was efficient. It was sustainable. It would preserve the empire for centuries. Constantinople itself changed. The population plummeted, from perhaps 600,000 to maybe 100,000. Entire districts were abandoned. Gardens replaced houses. Orchards grew in formerly busy squares. The city became a fortress with farms inside. But it endured. The economy transformed. Long-distance trade collapsed. Local production became essential. Every theme had to be self-sufficient. Coinage became scarce. Barter returned in many areas, but Constantinople maintained the gold standard. The solidus remained trusted, even by the Arabs. Culture shifted too. Latin disappeared except in legal terms. Greek became the only language. Classical education declined. Theological education expanded. Secular art nearly vanished. Religious art dominated. The empire became more medieval, less ancient. The year 674 brought another Arab siege of Constantinople. This time they came by sea. The siege lasted 4 years. Every summer the Arab fleet returned. Every summer it was repelled. Greek fire was used for the first time, the secret weapon. Liquid flame that burned on water. The Arab fleet was destroyed. The siege was lifted. Greek fire became Constantinople's signature weapon. The formula was state secret. Only the emperor and a few technicians knew it. It probably contained petroleum, maybe quicklime, definitely fear. Enemies fled at its sight. It saved the city multiple times, but the empire kept shrinking. The Bulgars established a kingdom in the Balkans. The Lombards consolidated in Italy. Armenia was contested. Anatolia was raided annually. The empire controlled less territory than at any time since Constantine, but it controlled the essential: Constantinople, Anatolia, the sea. The religious situation grew complex. Monothelitism was proposed as compromise. Christ had 2 natures but 1 will. It satisfied no one. The Pope condemned it. The Eastern patriarchs rejected it. Heraclius died believing he had failed. His theological compromise had only created more division. Constans II, Heraclius's grandson, tried different approaches. He moved the capital to Syracuse. He planned to reconquer the West. He was murdered in his bath. Hit with a soap dish. His plan died with him. Constantinople remained the capital. The West remained lost. Constantine the Wath succeeded. He faced the first Arab siege. He won. He also called the Sixth Ecumenical Council. Monothelitism was condemned. Orthodox doctrine was confirmed. Religious unity was partially restored, at least within the shrinking empire. The economy during this dark age was surprisingly resilient. Constantinople's workshops kept producing silk, jewellery, manuscripts, weapons. Quality remained high. Demand remained strong. Even the Arabs bought Byzantine goods, through intermediaries, but they bought. The military evolved continuously. The themes provided defensive depth. Raiders could penetrate, but they couldn't hold territory. Every farmer was a potential soldier. Every village was a potential fortress. The strategy was unglamorous, but effective. Naval power became crucial. Constantinople's fleet dominated the eastern Mediterranean, not through numbers, through technology. Greek fire, superior seamanship, better logistics. The navy kept supply lines open. It prevented total encirclement. The bureaucracy adapted too. It became smaller, more efficient, less corrupt. Perhaps. The logothetes replaced many older positions. The finances were centralized. The administration was streamlined. The empire could no longer afford redundancy. Education narrowed but deepened. Classical authors were still copied, but selectively. Military manuals, agricultural treatises, medical texts. Practical knowledge was preserved. Philosophy and poetry less so. Survival took precedence over culture. The church became more powerful. Monasteries multiplied. They provided social services, hospitals, orphanages, schools, hotels for travellers. The state couldn't afford these. The church could. Through donations, through land holdings, through faith. Women's roles evolved during the crisis. With so many men dead or fighting, women managed estates, ran businesses, even led military defences occasionally. The sources are sparse, but hints survive. Women keeping the empire functioning while men fought its wars. The period from 650 to 750 was the empire's darkest, but also its most heroic. Every year seemed to bring new disasters, plague, invasion, rebellion, earthquake. Yet Constantinople endured. The empire endured, reduced, battered, but unbroken. This survival wasn't miraculous. It was methodical. Good walls, disciplined troops, stable currency, efficient administration, technological advantages, geographic benefits, and above all, institutional memory. The empire knew how to endure. It had been doing it for centuries. The year 717 brought a new crisis and a new emperor. The Arabs besieged Constantinople again, this time with 200,000 men, 1,800 ships. It was the largest force ever assembled against the city. The emperor was deposed in panic. Leo III, a Syrian general, seized power. He would save the empire, then nearly destroy it from within. Leo understood military matters. The Arab fleet entered the Bosphorus. Greek fire destroyed it. The Arab army surrounded the city. Winter came early. Brutal cold. Deep snow. The Arabs weren't prepared. Disease spread through their camps. Bulgarian raiders attacked their supply lines. By spring, the siege was broken. The Arabs retreated. They would never seriously threaten Constantinople again. Leo had saved the empire. Now he decided to purify it. In 726, he issued his first iconoclastic decree. Icons were to be removed from churches. The veneration of images was forbidden. It was idolatry, he declared. God was punishing the empire for worshipping paintings instead of him. The reaction was immediate and violent. The people of Constantinople rioted. They loved their icons. These images weren't just art, they were windows to heaven, points of contact with saints, with Christ, with the Virgin. To destroy them was sacrilege. But Leo had the army's support, especially the Eastern themes. These soldiers had been fighting Muslims for generations. Islam forbade images. It was succeeding. Maybe God did prefer iconoclasm. The theological argument had military logic and military force. The Pope in Rome condemned iconoclasm immediately. But what could he do? Byzantine Italy was already nearly lost to the Lombards. The Pope began looking elsewhere for protection, to the Franks. This shift would reshape European history. The Byzantine Empire lost its Western religious authority forever. In Constantinople, the destruction began. The great icon of Christ above the palace gate was removed. The soldier ordered to take it down was attacked by women. They pulled his ladder away. He fell to his death. The women were executed. But they became martyrs. The conflict had its first blood. Churches were whitewashed. Mosaics were chiseled away. Manuscripts were burned. Centuries of art destroyed, but not everywhere. Some monks hid icons. Some churches claimed their decorations were historical, not religious. Some officials looked the other way, but much was lost. Irreplaceable beauty vanished. Leo died in 741. His son Constantine V continued the policy, but more systematically, more brutally. He was a true believer. Icons weren't just wrong, they were evil. Icon supporters weren't just mistaken, they were heretics. The persecution intensified. Constantine V was actually a capable emperor. He defeated the Arabs repeatedly. He crushed the Bulgars. He reformed the administration. He strengthened the economy. But history remembers him as Kopronimos, dung-named. His enemies claimed he defecated in his baptismal font as an infant. The slander stuck. In 754, Constantine called a council. 338 bishops attended. Icons were formally condemned. But the other patriarchates didn't participate. Rome, Alexandria, Antioch, Jerusalem all rejected it. The council wasn't ecumenical, it was purely Byzantine. The religious unity of Christianity was fracturing. Monasteries suffered most under Constantine V. Monks were the primary icon defenders. They were forced to marry, to break their vows. Some were paraded in the hippodrome holding hands with women. The crowd mocked them, threw things. Many fled to Italy, to Rome, taking their manuscripts, their knowledge, their art. The economic impact was significant. Monasteries had been major landowners, major producers, major employers. Their persecution disrupted agriculture. Trade networks failed. But the state seized their lands. The treasury filled. Constantine could fund his wars. Iconoclasm had financial benefits. Yet the empire prospered militarily under Constantine III. He won 9 battles against the Bulgars. He recovered much of Anatolia. The Arabs were pushed back. The army was loyal, well paid, well equipped. Success in war seemed to validate iconoclasm. God was pleased. The victories proved it. But society was divided. Families split. Icon supporters and iconoclasts stopped speaking, stopped marrying across the divide. 2 parallel societies emerged, both Byzantine, both Christian, but incompatible. The empire was strong externally, broken internally. Constantine V died in 775, on campaign, as he preferred. His son Leo IV succeeded, a moderate iconoclast, less brutal, less dogmatic. But his reign was brief. He died in 780. His son Constantine VI was only 9. His wife Irene became regent. Everything changed. Irene was an icon supporter, secretly at first. She had hidden icons in the palace. Now she could act, but carefully. The army was still iconoclast. The bureaucracy was divided. She needed time. She needed allies. She needed patience. She replaced officials slowly, promoted icon supporters, retired iconoclasts with honours. No purges, no violence. Just gradual change. By 787 she was ready. She called a new council, the 7th Ecumenical Council, in Nicaea, where the first had been. The council restored icon veneration, not worship. That distinction mattered. Icons could be honoured, kissed, used in prayer, but not worshipped. Only God deserved worship. The theological nuance was important. It allowed compromise. Some iconoclasts could accept it, but not the army. They attempted a coup. It failed. But the threat remained. Irene couldn't fully restore icons, not yet. She needed military success. She didn't get it. The Bulgars defeated her armies. The Arabs raided freely. Her weakness emboldened opponents. Her son Constantine VI came of age. He wanted to rule. Mother and son fought for power. First he won, exiled her, then she returned, won the army's loyalty, had him arrested, and then, in 797, she had him blinded. In the purple chamber where he was born, the symbolism was deliberate. He survived but could never rule. A blind emperor was impossible. Irene now ruled alone, not as regent, as emperor, Basileus. Not Basilissa, empress, the male title. She was emperor. The first woman to rule the Roman Empire in her own right. It was unprecedented. It was controversial. It was brief. The West used Irene's rule as pretext. A woman couldn't be emperor. Therefore, the throne was vacant. Therefore, Charlemagne could be crowned emperor of the Romans in 800. The Pope performed the coronation. The Byzantine monopoly on Roman legitimacy was broken. 2 emperors now claimed Rome's legacy. Irene tried to solve this through marriage. She proposed to Charlemagne, unite East and West, restore the whole empire. It might have worked. But she was overthrown in 802. The finance minister Nikephoros seized power. The marriage never happened. The division became permanent. Nikephoros I was competent but unpopular. He raised taxes, regulated the economy strictly, reformed the themes, made the government more efficient, less corrupt. But efficiency isn't loved. He was called the most greedy by contemporaries. History judges him more kindly. He died in battle against the Bulgars in 811. His skull became a drinking cup for the Bulgar Khan. His son Staurakios was mortally wounded, paralyzed. He lived 2 months as emperor, unable to move, unable to speak clearly. His brother-in-law Michael succeeded. Michael, I was weak. Pious, but weak. The Bulgars ravaged the empire. The army lost confidence. In 813, Leo the Armenian seized power. Iconoclasm returned. The second phase, less violent than the first, but still destructive. Leo V argued from pragmatism. The iconoclast emperors had won wars. The iconophile emperors had lost them. The evidence was clear. God preferred iconoclasm. The army agreed. The people grumbled but accepted. They were tired of chaos. But Leo was assassinated in 820 in Hagia Sophia on Christmas morning during Mass by supporters of his former friend Michael, murdered before the altar. His body was dragged out, thrown in the sewer. Michael the Cook took power, blood literally on his hands. Michael the Send was pragmatic. He ended persecution but didn't restore icons. A middle path. Neither side was satisfied, but neither rebelled. The empire had a moment to breathe, to recover. The economy improved, trade increased, the population began growing again. His son Theophilos succeeded in 829, the last iconoclast emperor, but also a builder, a patron of arts, just not religious arts. He built palaces, fountains, mechanical wonders, the throne room's golden organs, the golden tree with singing birds, technology as replacement for icons. Theophilos was also just. He held public courts. Any citizen could appeal directly. He reviewed death sentences personally, often commuted them. He tried to be the perfect emperor, wise, fair, victorious. He failed at the last. The Arabs sacked Amorion, his ancestral city. The defeat haunted him. He died in 842. His son Michael III was 3. His wife Theodora became regent. Like Irene before her, an icon supporter in secret. But unlike Irene, she succeeded permanently. In 843, icons were restored, the triumph of orthodoxy, still celebrated today. Iconoclasm was dead. The restoration was careful, no revenge. Iconoclasts weren't persecuted. Their books weren't burned. Their churches weren't destroyed. Theodora wanted healing, not more division. It largely worked. The empire reunified religiously, finally. But the damage was permanent. Centuries of art had been destroyed. The Western Church had separated. The Pope now looked to Frankish protection. The Eastern Patriarchates were under Muslim rule. Constantinople stood alone as defender of orthodoxy. Magnificent isolation. The iconoclast period transformed Byzantine culture. Art became more spiritual, less naturalistic. The classical tradition weakened further, but theological sophistication increased. The debates forced precise thinking, clear definitions. Byzantine theology became the most developed in Christianity. The economy during iconoclasm was surprisingly strong. Despite internal conflict, trade continued, production increased. The themes were fully developed, self-sufficient, defensible. The empire was smaller but more cohesive, more purely Greek, more purely Orthodox. The military reforms continued. The tagma regiments were created, elite units stationed near Constantinople, the Scolai, the Excubitoi, the Vigla, the Athanatoi, the Immortals, professional soldiers, superbly equipped. The empire's strategic reserve. They could reach any frontier in weeks. Naval development accelerated. New ship designs, better Greek fire delivery systems. Marines were trained, combined operations perfected. The empire couldn't match Arab numbers, but Byzantine quality was superior. One dromon could destroy 3 Arab ships. The bureaucracy evolved further. The themes gained more autonomy. But Constantinople maintained control through the postal system, the dromos. Messages could reach any theme in days. Orders were transmitted. Reports returned. Information was power. Constantinople monopolized it. Education began recovering. Bardas Caesar established new schools. The university was revitalized. Classical texts were copied again. Not many, but some. The Dark Age was ending. A Renaissance was beginning. The Macedonian Renaissance, though it would be called that later. Women's status remained complex. Empresses had ruled. Theodora was respected. But ordinary women faced restrictions. Convents multiplied. Some by choice, some by force. Political rivals' wives often became nuns, voluntarily or otherwise. The veil was both refuge and prison. The period ended with scandal. Michael III was called the Drunkard, probably unfairly. He appointed his favourite, Basil, as co-emperor. Basil murdered him in 867. A peasant had become emperor through assassination. It shouldn't have worked. But Basil founded the greatest Byzantine dynasty, the Macedonian dynasty. The empire's golden age was about to begin. Basil, I should have been a disaster as emperor, an illiterate peasant from Macedonia, a former wrestler, a murderer who killed his benefactor. But he proved brilliant. He understood that legitimacy came from success, from justice, from piety. He provided all 3. First, he secured the succession. He had 4 sons. He crowned them all co-emperors at different times. The principle was established. The empire would never lack for heirs. The Macedonian dynasty would rule for nearly 2 centuries, the longest in Byzantine history. Basil rebuilt systematically. Churches rose across the empire, the Nea Ecclesia in the palace complex, the most beautiful church since Hagia Sophia, destroyed now. But descriptions survive, gold everywhere, marble in every colour, light designed to create heaven on earth, architecture as theology. The legal system was reformed again, the Basilica, 60 books of law, Justinian's code updated, simplified, organised, written in Greek, not Latin. Finally, the empire's law in the empire's language. It would remain the standard until 1453, until the very end. The military victories began immediately. The Paulicians were crushed. These heretics had controlled eastern Anatolia, allied with the Arabs, created a state within the state. Basil destroyed them, settled the survivors in the Balkans, turned enemies into defenders. Byzantine pragmatism at its finest. Southern Italy was reinforced. Bari was recovered. The Adriatic became Byzantine again, partially. The Western emperors protested, but what could they do? Basil had the stronger army, the better generals, the actual power. Legitimacy followed strength. The navy expanded dramatically. 300 ships by Basil's death. Each droman carried 200 men. Greek fire siphons, catapults, everything needed for siege or battle. The Mediterranean was Byzantine water. Pirates disappeared. Trade flourished. Safety brought prosperity. But Basil's greatest achievement was administrative. He regularized everything: tax collection, military recruitment, judicial procedures, provincial governance. The empire became predictable. Predictability brought stability. Stability brought growth. The population increased. The economy expanded. Education flourished under Basil, despite his own illiteracy, or perhaps because of it. He valued what he lacked. The university was expanded. New chairs established: philosophy, mathematics, medicine, law. The classics were studied again: Homer, Plato, Aristotle, the ancient wisdom preserved. Photios was the intellectual giant of the age, patriarch, scholar, diplomat. His Bibliotheca summarized hundreds of ancient works, many now lost. We know them only through him. He preserved what would have vanished: the Byzantine mission. Preservation through transformation. The missionary work expanded. Cyril and Methodius went to the Slavs. They created the Cyrillic alphabet, translated the Bible, the liturgy. Slavic Christianity was born. Bulgarian, Serbian, Russian. All would look to Constantinople. The empire expanded through faith, not just arms. Basil died in 886. Hunting accident, or assassination. The sources disagree. His son Leo VI succeeded. Leo the Wise, the philosopher emperor, the opposite of his father, educated, refined, theoretical, but also effective, in his own way. Leo wrote constantly. Military manuals, the Tactica, still studied in military academies today, homilies, hundreds of them, laws, the novels, new legislation for new problems, poetry, hymns, an emperor who was actually an intellectual, rare in any age. The Arab threat was receding. The Abbasid Caliphate was fragmenting. Local emirates fought each other more than Byzantium. The empire exploited this, playing one against another, diplomacy cheaper than war, gold cheaper than blood, the Byzantine way. But new threats emerged. The Bulgars under Simeon, educated in Constantinople. He knew Byzantine strengths and weaknesses. He wanted to be emperor himself, or at least equal to the emperor. The wars were brutal, personal, between former friends. The Rus appeared for the first time. Vikings who had travelled down Russian rivers, reached the Black Sea, attacked Constantinople in 907. The city was shocked, barbarians from nowhere, but they were repelled, then hired as mercenaries. The Varangian Guard was born, the emperor's personal warriors, loyal only to the purple. Leo's personal life was scandalous. 4 marriages, each controversial. The church allowed 3, maximum. Leo needed a legitimate son. His mistress Zoe gave him one. He married her. His 4th marriage. The church split. The tetragamy controversy. It seems minor now. Then it threatened civil war. Leo died in 912. His son Constantine VII was 6, too young to rule. Regents took power, first a council, then Romanos Lekapenos, a successful admiral. He made himself emperor, married his daughter to Constantine, pushed the legitimate emperor aside, but kept him alive. That was the mistake. Romanos was actually competent. He fought the Bulgars to a standstill, expanded in the east, took Melitene. The Arabs were pushed back everywhere. The empire was winning. Finally, after centuries of defense, offense was possible. But Romanos made enemies. His land legislation favored small farmers. The powerful families were furious. The Dynatoi, the powerful ones, military aristocrats. They wanted more land, more power. Romanos blocked them, tried to preserve the theme system, the farmer soldiers, the empire's backbone. In 944, Romanos's own sons overthrew him, exiled him to a monastery they expected to rule. But Constantine VII was ready. 25 years of waiting, watching, learning. He seized power. The legitimate emperor finally ruled, at age 39, Constantine VII, Porphyrogenitos, born in the purple, the perfect emperor in Byzantine theory, legitimate, educated, pious. He preferred books to battles. But he understood both. His reign was the cultural apex of the Middle Byzantine period. The Book of Ceremonies, Constantine's masterwork, every court ritual described, every precedent recorded, how to receive ambassadors, how to crown emperors, how to celebrate Easter, how to be Byzantine. It preserved a civilization in words, a manual for empire. He wrote more, De Administrando Imperio, how to rule the empire, secret knowledge for his son, which peoples to trust, which to fear, how to manipulate barbarians, how to preserve Roman superiority, cynical. Practical, brilliant. The empire's extent under Constantine was impressive. From southern Italy to eastern Anatolia, from the Danube to Syria. Not the universal empire of Justinian, but sustainable, defensible, rich. The themes produced wealth. Constantinople consumed it, but also redistributed it. The city itself reached new heights. Perhaps 500,000 people, the Second Golden Age, building everywhere, the Myralean Church, the Lips Monastery. Architecture became vertical, domes on drums, height suggesting transcendence, the Byzantine aesthetic fully developed. Craft production flourished. Silk workshops employed thousands, jewellery makers, manuscript illuminators, ivory carvers, enamel workers. Byzantine luxury goods were desired everywhere, from Cordoba to Cairo, from Kiev to Rome. Quality no one could match. The Book of the Eparch regulated everything. Every guild, every price, every standard, bread weight, wine quality, silk grades, fish freshness. The state controlled all. But control brought predictability. Predictability brought trust. Trust brought prosperity. Constantine died in 959. His son Romanos II succeeded. Young, handsome, lazy, but he chose good generals. Nikephoros Phocas, John Tzimiskes, Leo Phocas. The White Death of the Saracens. They would transform the empire from defensive to offensive, permanently. Nikephoros Phocas took Crete in 961. The island had been an Arab pirate base for 135 years. The empire had tried to retake it repeatedly. Failed every time. Nikephoros succeeded. The eastern Mediterranean was secure again. Trade routes reopened. Prosperity followed security. Cilicia fell next. Tarsus, Adana, Mopsuestia. The mountain passes secured. Anatolia was safe, for the first time in centuries. No more annual raids, no more devastation. Farmers could plan beyond next season. Investment became possible. Growth followed. Cyprus was recovered in 965, shared with the Arabs, neutral territory. But Byzantine influence dominated. The island's wealth flowed to Constantinople. Copper, timber, agricultural products, every resource valuable, every gain cumulative. But Romanos II died in 963. Poison was suspected. His wife Theophano was suspected more. Beautiful, ambitious, dangerous. His sons were children. Basil II was 5. Constantine VIII was 3. The empire needed a strong hand. Nikephoros Phocas took the throne, and Theophano. Nikephoros Phocas was not what Constantinople expected in an emperor. Ascetic to the point of fanaticism. He wore a hair shirt under his imperial robes. He slept on the floor. He ate 1 meal a day, beans and water. The palace kitchens were confused. The courtiers appalled. But the army loved him. He was the White Death of the Saracens, undefeated in 40 battles. His very name caused Arab mothers to quiet their children. Nikephoros will come. The threat worked, because Nikephoros did come, again and again, each time victorious. Antioch was the great prize. Lost to the Arabs in 637, 3 centuries of Muslim rule, the third city of the Old Empire, after Rome and Constantinople. In 969, Nikephoros took it. The siege was methodical, scientific. The walls were undermined. Greek fire cleared the battlements. The city fell in 3 days. The recovery of Antioch sent shockwaves. From Baghdad to Cordoba, from Rome to Kiev, the empire of the Romans was resurgent, not defending, conquering. The cross advanced where the crescent had ruled. The psychological impact exceeded the strategic. But Nikephoros made enemies at home. He taxed the church. He restricted monastery foundation. He regulated religious festivals. The patriarch protested. The people grumbled. An emperor should be pious, but not too pious. Nikephoros was too pious and too successful. Success breeds envy. His wife Theophano took a lover, John Tzimiskes, Nikephoros' own nephew, his best general after himself. Together they plotted. On December 11th, 969, assassins entered the palace. Nikephoros was praying. He died on the floor he preferred to his bed. His head was displayed from the palace window. Constantinople barely reacted. John Tzimiskes took the throne, but the patriarch refused to crown him, not while he kept Theophano. The murderous empress was exiled. John did public penance, distributed gold to the poor, founded hospitals, bought legitimacy with good works. It worked. He was crowned. John was perhaps the greatest Byzantine general ever. He didn't just defeat enemies, he annihilated them. In 971, he crushed the Rus. Sviatoslav had conquered Bulgaria, threatened Constantinople itself. John destroyed his army. 20,000 Rus died. Sviatoslav barely escaped. He signed any treaty John offered. Then John turned east. The Arabs were in full retreat. Mesopotamia was invaded, Nisibis taken, Martyropolis surrendered. John reached places no Roman had seen since Heraclius, some not since Trajan. The empire hadn't been this powerful in 5 centuries. In 975, John marched on Jerusalem. The holy city was within reach. Its recovery would crown his reign, complete the restoration, make him the greatest emperor since Constantine. Then he died. Suddenly. Poison was suspected. It always was. But probably it was just fever. The march had been exhausting. Basilsek succeeded. He was 18. He had waited in the shadows while 2 usurpers ruled. Now it was his turn, but he wasn't ready. The first decade was disastrous. Rebellions everywhere. Bardas Skleros in the east. Bardas Phocas in Anatolia. Both were great generals. Both had stronger armies. Bulgaria was the worst crisis. Samuel had created a new Bulgarian empire. While Byzantium fought itself, Bulgaria expanded. Macedonia was taken, Thessaly raided, Albania conquered. Samuel crowned himself emperor. 2 emperors were one too many. Basil knew this. The defeat at Trajan's Gate in 986 nearly ended Basil's reign. His army was ambushed in a mountain pass, destroyed. Basil barely escaped. He fled on foot for 2 days, alone. Hunted, but he survived, and learned. Never again would he be careless. Never again would he lose. Basil transformed himself. From pampered prince to soldier emperor. He trained constantly, learned tactics, studied logistics, memorized every officer's name, shared soldiers' rations, marched with them, fought beside them, became them. The army responded. They would die for him. Many did. The civil wars ended by 989. Bardas Phocas died in battle, literally. Heart attack while charging. His rebellion died with him. Bardas Skleros surrendered, was pardoned, even honoured. Basil could be merciful when it served his purpose. Vladimir of Kiev provided the solution to manpower problems. He wanted Byzantine prestige, a purple bride. Basil's sister Anna. Impossible normally, but Basil needed soldiers, 6,000 Rus warriors. The Varangian Guard expanded. Vladimir got his princess and Christianity. Russia became Orthodox. The deal reshaped history. With internal peace, Basil turned to Bulgaria. Not a campaign. A war of annihilation. 20 years of systematic destruction. Every year Basil invaded, burned crops, destroyed fortresses, killed warriors, but also showed mercy. Bulgarian nobles who submitted kept their titles, their lands, became Byzantine aristocrats. The campaign was methodical, grinding, unheroic, but effective. Each year Bulgaria grew weaker. Samuel grew desperate. In 1014 at Cladion the end came. Basil captured 15,000 Bulgarian soldiers. He could have killed them. Instead, he blinded them. All but one in every 100, those kept one eye to lead the others home. The blinded army stumbled back to Samuel. He saw them, had a stroke, died 2 days later. Bulgaria collapsed. In 1018, after 30 years of war, Bulgaria was annexed. The Danube was the frontier again, for the first time in 4 centuries. Basil ruled differently than his predecessors. No luxury, no ceremony, or rather minimal ceremony. He dressed simply, ate simply, never married, no children, no favourites, no friends, just the empire. He was the empire. The empire was him. The aristocracy was crushed, not physically, legally. The novels restricted land acquisition, protected small farmers, prevented the powerful from absorbing the weak. The dinotoi raged, but carefully. Basil forgot nothing, forgave less. Cross him once, lose lands, twice lose eyes. There was no third time. The empire under Basil reached its medieval peak. From the Danube to the Euphrates, from southern Italy to the Caucasus, 1 million square kilometres, 12 million people. The budget ran surpluses. The treasury overflowed. £200,000 of gold in reserve. No empire on earth was richer. Constantinople exceeded 500,000 again. Maybe more. Building boomed. The aristocracy, unable to buy land, built palaces, churches, monasteries. The city grew vertically. 4, 5 stories. Urban density unprecedented in medieval Europe, but organized, regulated, Byzantine. Trade networks stretched everywhere. Byzantine merchants in London, in Cairo, in Kiev, in Baghdad. The solidus was accepted from Iceland to India. Byzantine silk clothed caliphs and kings. Byzantine manuscripts preserved ancient wisdom. Byzantine art decorated palaces from Cordoba to Jerusalem. The military was perfectly organized. The themes provided defense. 120,000 farmer soldiers. The tagmata provided offense. 20,000 professionals. The Varangian Guard provided security. 6,000 devoted warriors. Combined, they were invincible. Under Basil, the navy dominated 3 seas, the Mediterranean, the Black Sea, the Aegean. 400 ships, 40,000 sailors and marines. Greek fire remained the secret weapon. But Byzantine superiority went beyond technology. Training, discipline, coordination. Qualities money couldn't buy, only time could develop. Culture flourished despite Basil's personal austerity. Or because of it, the emperor didn't patronize arts. So aristocrats did, competing for prestige. The Menologion of Basil. 400 miniatures, the pinnacle of Byzantine illumination. Psalters, chronicles, saints' lives, all illustrated magnificently. Architecture evolved further. The cross in square became standard. A dome over the centre, forearms extending, perfect proportion, human scale, divine aspiration. Churches like jewel boxes, small but perfect. The Capnicarea in Athens, the Cattolica in Stilo, gems of Byzantine art. Basil died in 1025, on campaign, planning to reconquer Sicily, aged 70, unmarried, childless. The longest reigning Byzantine emperor, the most successful, The empire would never be stronger, never be richer, never be more secure. The decline began immediately. Constantine V had waited 65 years to rule alone, Basil's younger brother, co-emperor since childhood. But never really emperor. Now at age 65 he finally had power. He used it for pleasure, feasts, games, women. The treasury Basil had filled began emptying. Constantine had no sons, 3 daughters. Eudokia became a nun. Theodora refused marriage. That left Zoe, age 48, still unmarried. Constantine needed an heir. Zoe needed a husband. Romanos Argyros was chosen, a 60-year-old bureaucrat. The marriage was arranged 3 days before Constantine died. The succession was secured. Barely. Romanos III tried to be Basil's son. He failed. Military expeditions were disasters. In Syria his army was ambushed. He fled, leaving his imperial tent. The Arabs paraded it mockingly. Building projects bankrupted the treasury. The Church of the Peribleptos was magnificent and magnificently expensive. The gold Basil hoarded vanished. Zoe took a lover, Michael, young, handsome, from Paphlagonia, a money changer's brother. The scandal was open. Everyone knew. Romanos was found dead in his bath in 1034, drowned somehow. That same day, Zoe married Michael. The patriarch was summoned, threatened. He performed the ceremony. Michael IV was emperor. Michael IV was epileptic. His fits were seen as divine possession, or demonic. Opinions varied, but he was competent. When healthy, his brother John the Orphanatrophus really ruled, a eunuch, brilliant, corrupt, utterly corrupt. Offices were sold, taxes were raised, new taxes invented, the tax on air literally for breathing, the empire groaned. But Michael IV could fight. In 1038, the Bulgarians rebelled. Peter Delian claimed to be Samuel's grandson. Bulgaria rose. Michael marched despite his illness, won battle after battle, destroyed the rebellion, died returning to Constantinople. His epilepsy finally killed him. Zoe was widowed again. She was forced to adopt Michael V, the Orphanatrophos' nephew. Another Paphlagonian. He was supposed to be grateful, controllable. He wasn't. In 1042 he exiled Zoe to a convent. Constantinople exploded. The people loved their purple-born empress. However scandalous, the mob surrounded the palace. Michael V hid in a monastery, was dragged out, blinded in the hippodrome. The crowd cheered. Zoe returned. With her sister Theodora, they ruled jointly, 2 empresses, both in their 60s. It was bizarre, but it worked. Briefly. The sisters hated each other, had for decades. Zoe wanted another husband, found Constantine Monomachos, exiled aristocrat, charming, useless, perfect for her purposes. Constantine Ningt ruled from 1042 to 1055. The empire rotted, the army was neglected. Local militias replaced professional troops. Cheaper, much cheaper, and much worse. The navy was disbanded, ships were expensive, mercenaries were hired instead, Vikings, Normans, Turks, anyone who would fight for gold. New enemies appeared. The Pechenegs crossed the Danube, raided constantly. The Normans consolidated in southern Italy. Byzantine territory shrank. The Seljuk Turks appeared in the east, probing, testing, finding weakness. Everywhere weakness. Constantine IX didn't care. He had his mistress, Maria Sclerina, openly kept in the palace, with Zoe's permission. The 3 of them processed together, the empress, the emperor, the mistress. Constantinople watched amazed. Morality seemed dead. Standards certainly were. The Great Schism happened in 1054. Cardinal Humbert placed a bull of excommunication on Hagia Sophia's altar. The Patriarch responded in kind. East and West separated. Officially. Finally. The breach had been building for centuries. Now it was formal. Permanent. The Christian world split in 2. Constantine IX died in 1055. Zoe had died in 1050. Theodora ruled alone, age 75, the last Macedonian. She ruled well, surprisingly well, reduced corruption, restored some discipline, but she was old, dying. In 1056 she chose Michael VI as successor, an elderly bureaucrat, the wrong choice. The military aristocracy had been suppressed for decades, since Basil VI. Now they revolted. Isaac Comnenus led them. The eastern armies proclaimed him emperor. Michael VI abdicated, became a monk, lived peacefully. Isaac then took power. The military aristocracy was ascendant. Isaac tried to restore discipline, cut expenses, reduced the bloated bureaucracy, taxed monasteries, made enemies everywhere. In 1059 he fell ill, or claimed to, abdicated, became a monk. His motives remain mysterious. Perhaps he saw what was coming, preferred contemplation to catastrophe. Constantine X Ducas succeeded, another aristocrat but weak. The borders crumbled, the Uzes crossed the Danube, reached Thessalonica, the Normans took Bari, the last Byzantine city in Italy. The Seljuks raided Anatolia, took Ani. The empire was being eaten alive. The army was a shadow. The themes were destroyed. Farmers had been replaced by aristocratic estates. No farmers meant no soldiers. Mercenaries were unreliable, expensive, often treacherous. The empire's military system, perfected over centuries, was gone, destroyed by its own ruling class. Constantine X died in 1067. His wife Eudokia became regent for her young sons. But the empire needed a soldier. She married Romanos Diogenes, a general, competent, energetic. He tried to restore the army, rebuild the themes. Too late. Far too late. The Seljuks were different from earlier enemies. Not raiders, conquerors. They wanted land. Anatolia's land, the empire's heartland. Romanos gathered what army he could, mercenaries mostly, Normans, Pechenegs, Armenians, even Turks. In 1071 he marched east, to destiny. Manzikert was not a massive battle, perhaps 20,000 on each side, but it was decisive. Romanos was betrayed. Andronikos Ducas, his rival, fled with the rear guard, spread rumours the emperor was dead. The army dissolved. Romanos fought heroically, was captured, the first Roman emperor captured in battle since Valerian. Alp Arslan, the Seljuk Sultan, was merciful, released Romanos for ransom, reasonable terms, but Romanos returned to civil war. Michael VII had seized power. Romanos was defeated, blinded, died from infected wounds. The empire tore itself apart while the Turks watched. Anatolia was lost, not in one battle, but Manzikert broke Byzantine prestige. Turkish tribes poured in, city after city fell or was abandoned. Within a decade, the Turks reached the Aegean. The empire lost its recruiting grounds, its tax base, its food supply, its heart. Constantinople still stood, still magnificent, but increasingly isolated, an enormous head on a shrinking body. The population began declining. Trade routes shifted. Wealth decreased. The Italian cities, Venice, Genoa, Pisa, grew stronger. Byzantine weakness was their opportunity. The coinage was debased. The solidus, stable for 7 centuries, was corrupted. Gold content reduced. Multiple denominations created. Confusion, inflation, economic chaos. Trust evaporated. With it, Byzantine commercial supremacy. Culture continued despite crisis. Michael Psellos wrote history, philosophy, letters, brilliant prose, honest about the empire's decline, perhaps too honest. His contemporaries preferred denial. But Psellos recorded truth. The empire was dying. He documented its symptoms. The church remained powerful, perhaps too powerful. Monasteries controlled vast lands, paid no taxes, produced little. The state couldn't tap their wealth, not effectively. The church's power grew as the states shrank. an inverse relationship. Parasitic, some said. Others said salvific. Education narrowed, the university struggled, fewer students, fewer teachers, less money. Classical learning survived, but barely. Theology dominated. Practical subjects disappeared. The empire needed engineers, soldiers, administrators. It produced theologians, monks, mystics. The practical Romans would have wept. Women's roles shifted during the crisis. More empresses, more regents. Necessity, not progress. Men died in civil wars, in battles. From blinding, women survived, ruled, often better than men. Eudokia Macrembolitissa, Anna Dalassen. Strong women in collapsing times. The year 1078 brought new chaos. Nikephoros III. Botaniates seized power, an old general, nearly 80. His reign was disaster. Turkish raids reached Constantinople's suburbs. People could see smoke from burning villages, from the city walls. The empire's heartland burned while the capital watched helplessly. 2 generals revolted simultaneously, Nikephoros Bryennios in the west, Alexios Komnenos in the east. Both marched on Constantinople. Alexios arrived first. In 1081 he took the city. Nikephoros III abdicated, became a monk. The Komnenian dynasty began, the empire's last true revival. Alexios I Komnenos inherited catastrophe. The empire controlled little beyond Constantinople's walls. Anatolia was lost to Turks, the Balkans to Pechenegs, Italy to Normans. The treasury was empty, the army non-existent, the coinage worthless. Lesser men would have surrendered. Alexios fought. First, the Normans. Robert Guiscard invaded in 1081, the greatest warrior of his age. He had conquered southern Italy. Now he wanted Constantinople. His army landed at Dyrrhachium, the Via Egnatia's western terminus, the road to Constantinople. If Dyrrhachium fell, the capital was threatened. Alexios had no army, just the Varangian Guard, some hastily recruited locals, and gold. He hired everyone. Turks to fight Normans, Germans to fight Turks, Pechenegs to fight Germans. Byzantine diplomacy at its most cynical and most effective. The Battle of Dyrrhachium was disaster. The Varangians charged prematurely, were slaughtered. The army fled. Alexios barely escaped. But he didn't despair. He retreated, harassed the Normans, bribed their allies, spread disease in their camps. Guiscard died of fever in 1085. The invasion collapsed. Alexios had won by not losing. The Pechenegs came next. 90,000 nomads. They reached Constantinople's walls in 1090. The city was blockaded. Starvation threatened. Alexios allied with the Cumans, other nomads, enemies of the Pechenegs. At Livonian in 1091 the Pechenegs were annihilated, so completely that a saying arose, like the Pecheneg day, meaning gone forever. The empire was stabilizing, slowly, painfully, but stabilizing. Then Alexios had an idea, a dangerous idea. He would ask the West for help, mercenaries to reconquer Anatolia. He sent ambassadors to Pope Urban II. The request was simple, send soldiers. The response was not what he expected. Urban called for crusade in 1095. Not mercenaries for Byzantium, holy war for Jerusalem. Knights poured east, tens of thousands. Not disciplined soldiers, religious fanatics, led by proud nobles, Bohemond, Guiscard's son, Alexios's old enemy, Raymond of Toulouse, Godfrey of Bouillon. They came for salvation, and land, and gold. The People's Crusade arrived first, led by Peter the Hermit. Peasants mostly, undisciplined, hungry. They pillaged Byzantine territory. Alexios shipped them to Anatolia quickly. The Turks massacred them. Problem solved. But the real crusaders were coming. Alexios handled them brilliantly. Each leader was received separately, awed by Constantinople's wealth, required to swear oaths, become the emperor's vassal, return conquered lands to Byzantium. Most swore, reluctantly. Bohemond swore enthusiastically. He had plans. Secret plans. The Crusaders were successful. Surprisingly successful. Nicaea fell in 1097, returned to Byzantium as promised. Antioch fell in 1098. Not returned. Bohemond kept it. Claimed the Byzantines hadn't helped enough. The alliance was fracturing. Jerusalem fell in 1019. The Crusaders massacred everyone, Muslims, Jews, even Orthodox Christians. The Byzantines were horrified. The Crusader states were established. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, the Principality of Antioch, the County of Edessa, the County of Tripoli. They were supposed to be Byzantine vassals. They weren't. They were independent, hostile often, Antioch especially. Bohemond's principality, built on Byzantine land. Alexios adapted. He couldn't control the Crusaders, but he could use them. They fought the Turks, distracted them. While they fought, Alexios reconquered western Anatolia, the coastlands, the fertile valleys, the great cities, Ephesus, Sardis, Philadelphia. The empire was recovering. The Komnenian system emerged. Different from the old empire, based on family, the extended Komnenos clan, dozens of relatives, each given titles, commands, governorships, loyalty through blood. It worked. For a while. But it created resentment. Non-Komnenoi were excluded. Talent was wasted. The pronoia system replaced the themes, land grants for military service, like Western feudalism, but temporary, theoretically, in practice, increasingly hereditary. The state lost direct control. Local magnates gained power. The empire became decentralized, more medieval, less Roman. John II, Komnenos, succeeded in 1118, Alexios' son, called John the Beautiful, or the Good, the best emperor since Basil I. Modest, pious, competent. His reign was successful, but overshadowed by his father before, his son after. History is unfair. John reconquered more of Anatolia, pushed the Turks back, recovered the southern coastlands. The Danube frontier was secured, the Hungarians defeated, the Serbs subdued, even Antioch was humbled. John forced Raymond to acknowledge Byzantine suzerainty. Briefly, Raymond reneged once John left. The empire under John was stable, prosperous even. Trade flourished. The Venetians had privileges, too many privileges. Free trade throughout the empire, no taxes. Byzantine merchants couldn't compete. But Venice provided naval support. The empire had no choice. Its own navy was gone. Manuel IV succeeded in 1143. John's youngest son, charismatic, energetic, westernized. He loved tournaments, spoke Latin, married a German princess, then a French one. The Byzantine court became cosmopolitan. Western knights served there. Eastern traditions mixed with Western fashions. Manuel dreamed big, too big. He wanted to restore the universal empire, reconquer Italy, dominate the Crusader states, humble the German emperor, control the papacy, the dreams of Justinian. But this wasn't the 6th century. The world had changed. The Second Crusade came in 1147, led by Louis VII of France, Conrad III of Germany. It was a disaster. The Germans were ambushed in Anatolia. The French barely reached Jerusalem, accomplished nothing, blamed Byzantium. Manuel had provided supplies, guides, but not enough, they said. The West's suspicion of Byzantium deepened. Manuel invaded Italy in 1155. Initial success. Bari was retaken, Ancona allied. But the Normans counterattacked. The Venetians opposed him. The Pope condemned him. The German emperor threatened intervention. Manuel retreated. The Italian dream died. Forever. In the east, Manuel had more success. Antioch was humbled again. Reinald, its prince, grovelled publicly, barefoot, in sackcloth, the ultimate humiliation. The Crusader states acknowledged Byzantine supremacy, nominally. But Manuel couldn't enforce it. Too far away, too many enemies. The Battle of Myriokephalon in 1176 ended Manuel's ambitions. The Seljuk Sultan Kilij Arslan II ambushed the Byzantine army in a mountain pass. Like Manzikert, the army was destroyed. Manuel escaped, but broken. He never campaigned again. The reconquest of Anatolia was abandoned. Manuel died in 1180. His son Alexios II was 11. His widow Maria of Antioch became regent, a Westerner ruling Byzantium. The people hated her. The aristocracy plotted. In 1182, Andronikos Komnenos seized power. Manuel's cousin, 64 years old, brilliant, charming, completely ruthless. The coup was bloody. Westerners were massacred in Constantinople. Thousands died. Venetians, Genoese, Pisans, French, anyone Latin. The streets ran with blood. The West was horrified, Venice especially. They would remember. They would have revenge. Andronikos ruled through terror. Aristocrats were executed, tortured, blinded, property was confiscated. The people initially supported him. He fought corruption, lowered taxes, but the terror escalated. Everyone became suspect. The empire ate itself through fear. In 1185 the Normans invaded again. Thessalonica fell, the empire's second city, massacred. Andronikos blamed his generals, executed them. The people had enough. When Isaac Angelus revolted, Constantinople supported him. Andronikos was captured, tortured for days, publicly. The mob tore him apart, literally. The Komnenian dynasty ended in blood. The Angeloi were disasters. Isaac III was weak. Taxation soared. The army deteriorated. The Bulgarians revolted successfully. The Second Bulgarian Empire was born. Serbia became independent. Cyprus rebelled. The empire fragmented. The Third Crusade brought new humiliation. Frederick Barbarossa marched through Byzantine territory. Isaac couldn't stop him, didn't try, just watched, provided supplies, begged him to leave quickly. The mighty empire reduced to begging. In 1195, Isaac was overthrown by his brother, Alexios III, even worse than Isaac. The empire became a joke. The army barely existed. The navy was gone, sold, ship by ship, for immediate cash. The frontiers were undefended. Anyone could invade. Many did. The Fourth Crusade assembled in 1202, aimed at Egypt, but Venice controlled the ships. Venice wanted revenge for 1182, for lost privileges, for wounded pride. The crusade was diverted to Constantinople. Alexios IV, son of the deposed Isaac the King, promised the Crusaders everything: gold, church union, military support. If they restored him, they did in 1203. But he couldn't deliver. The treasury was empty. The people rejected church union. The army didn't exist. In January 1204, Alexios IV was overthrown, murdered. Alexios V, Mortzouphlos, seized power, tried to resist. Too late. On April 12th, 1204, the Crusaders breached the walls. Constantinople fell. For the first time since its foundation, the Eternal City was conquered. The sack lasted 3 days. Systematic looting, churches stripped, palaces emptied, libraries burned, nuns raped, priests murdered. The greatest city in Christendom destroyed by Christians. The West's betrayal was complete. The empire of the Romans was dead, or so it seemed. Constantinople burned for 3 days, not from accident, from design. The Crusaders wanted loot. Every church was stripped. Golden crosses melted down. Silver icons became coins. Jeweled gospel covers were pried apart. Sacred vessels became drinking cups. The altar of Hagia Sophia was shattered, looking for hidden gold. The human cost was worse. Monks were tortured to reveal hidden treasures. Nuns were violated in their convents. The patriarch was thrown from a column. Anyone suspected of hiding wealth was killed. The Crusaders showed no mercy. These weren't infidels. These were fellow Christians. It didn't matter. The cultural destruction was irreplaceable. The imperial library burned. Manuscripts 1,000 years old. Gone. The works of ancient authors lost forever. Statues were melted for bronze. The 4 horses of the Hippodrome were shipped to Venice. They stand there still, in St. Mark's Square, Byzantine glory decorating its destroyer. Baldwin of Flanders was elected Latin emperor. The Crusaders divided the empire, like a carcass. Venice took the best parts, 3/8 of Constantinople, Crete, Euboea, key ports everywhere, the trade routes, the real wealth. The Frankish knights took lands, duchies, principalities, fiefdoms. The empire became a patchwork, a feudal mess. But the Byzantines didn't disappear. They retreated, regrouped. 3 successor states emerged: the Empire of Trebizond on the Black Sea, the Despotate of Epirus in the west, the Empire of Nicaea in Anatolia. Each claimed to be the true Roman Empire. Nicaea had the strongest claim. Theodore Lascaris led the Nicaean resistance, son-in-law of Alexios III. Not a promising pedigree, but desperate times produced unexpected heroes. Theodore was competent, determined, lucky. He needed all 3. The Latins wanted to crush Nicaea immediately, eliminate the threat. The Battle of Poimenanen in 1204 saved Nicaea. The Latin Emperor Baldwin was defeated, captured by the Bulgarians, died in captivity. His skull became a drinking cup. Again. The Bulgarians had a tradition. The Latin Empire, barely born, was already struggling. Theodore organized methodically, created a government in exile, appointed a patriarch, crowned himself emperor in 1208. Not in Constantinople, in Nicaea, but emperor nonetheless. The continuity was maintained. The Roman Empire lived, in reduced circumstances, but it lived. The Nicaean Empire was small but efficient. Western Anatolia, basically. Good farmland, defensible borders. The Seljuks were quiet, fighting each other. The Latins were weak, fighting everyone. Nicaea grew stronger, year by year, slowly, carefully. The economy was rebuilt, trade resumed. With the Turks, ironically, they preferred Byzantine merchants to Italian ones. Less aggressive, more honest. The coinage was restored. Real gold. Not the debased coins of the Angeloi. Trust returned. With trust, prosperity. The army was reconstructed. Not mercenaries. Native troops. The old theme system partially restored. Pronoia grants for military service, but controlled, limited. The mistakes of the Komnenoi weren't repeated. The state maintained authority. John III Vatatzes succeeded Theodore in 1222. The greatest of the Nicaean emperors, ruled 33 years, transformed a rump state into a viable empire, ready to reclaim its inheritance. Almost did. Would have, but death intervened. John was everything the late Byzantine emperors weren't. Frugal, just, competent. He lived simply. No elaborate ceremonies, no expensive court. The money saved went to the army, to fortifications, to practical things. His wife's crown was sold. The money fed the poor. The contrast with the Latin emperors was stark. The Latin Empire was dying. Venice extracted its wealth. The Frankish knights fought each other. The Greek population hated them. Religious oppression, economic exploitation, cultural contempt. The Latins treated Greeks as conquered subjects, not fellow Christians. The resentment was profound. John III exploited this brilliantly. His armies recovered most of Anatolia, crossed into Europe, took Thrace, surrounded Constantinople. The city was isolated, starving. In 1235, John allied with the Bulgarians. Constantinople nearly fell. The Latins were saved by accident. The Bulgarian Tsar died. The alliance collapsed. The city survived. Barely. But John was patient. He knew time favoured Nicaea. Every year the Latin Empire weakened, lost territory, lost revenue, lost hope. Every year Nicaea grew stronger. More territory, more resources, more confidence. The restoration was inevitable, just not yet. Education flourished in Nicaea. Scholars fled there from Constantinople, brought manuscripts, knowledge, culture. The university was re-established. Philosophy was taught again, mathematics, astronomy, medicine. The intellectual tradition survived, thrived even, in exile. Theodore II, Lascaris, succeeded in 1254. John's son, an intellectual, wrote philosophy, corresponded with scholars, but also paranoid, suspicious. He alienated the aristocracy, trusted only his friends, appointed them to high positions. The established families were furious. Theodore died in 1258. His son John IV was 7. A regency was established. Michael Palaiologos took control. An aristocrat, ambitious, ruthless. He made himself co-emperor, then sole emperor. John IV was blinded on his 11th birthday, Christmas Day. The cruelty was shocking, even by Byzantine standards. But Michael VIII was the right man for the moment. Constantinople was ready to fall. The Latin Empire controlled almost nothing, just the city, some surrounding territory. It survived on Venetian support, Genoese loans, papal promises, all wearing thin. Michael prepared carefully, allied with Genoa against Venice, promised trade privileges, military support, anything they wanted. Venice was isolated. The Latin Empire's main supporter neutralized. The path to Constantinople was clear. In July 1261, a small Nicaean force approached Constantinople. Just 800 men, a reconnaissance. The city seemed defended. Then they learned the truth. The Latin army was away, attacking a Nicaean island. The Venetian fleet was away, also attacking Nicaean territory. Constantinople was undefended. A sympathizer opened a gate. The Nicaean troops entered. July 25th, 1261. The Latin Emperor Baldwin II fled. So quickly he left his crown behind. The Latin Patriarch fled. The Venetian Podesta fled. Everyone fled. The city was retaken without a battle. After 57 years, Constantinople was Roman again. Michael VIII entered the city on August 15th, the feast of the Dormition, walking, behind an icon of the Virgin, barefoot, humble. The symbolism was perfect. The Virgin had protected her city, brought it home. The crowds wept. The empire was restored. But what an empire! Constantinople was a shadow. Perhaps 50,000 people in a city built for 1 million. Entire districts abandoned. Ruins everywhere. The palaces were stripped. The churches empty. Weeds grew in the hippodrome. The Queen of Cities had become a ghost. The empire itself was tiny. Constantinople, northwestern Anatolia. Some Aegean islands, that was all. The Latins still held much of Greece. The Bulgarians held the north. The Serbs the west. The Turks the east. The restored empire was smaller than many kingdoms, but it was the Roman Empire that mattered to the Byzantines. Michael VIII. Palaiologos faced an impossible task. Constantinople was ruined. The empire was fragmented. Enemies surrounded him. The Latins wanted reconquest. The Bulgarians wanted expansion. The Turks wanted everything. And the empire had no money, no army, no fleet, just history and determination. Michael's first priority was survival. The Pope called for a new crusade to restore the Latin Empire. Charles of Anjou, the French king's brother, took up the cause. He conquered southern Italy, built a fleet, gathered an army. Constantinople would be retaken. Byzantium would be destroyed permanently. Michael responded with diplomacy. Byzantine diplomacy at its most sophisticated, he offered church union. The Orthodox Church would acknowledge papal supremacy in exchange for peace. The Pope was interested. Church union was his dream, worth more than any military victory. The Union of Lions was proclaimed in 1274. Michael's representatives accepted papal authority. The Filioque was acknowledged, Latin doctrine accepted. The Pope was triumphant. Charles of Anjou was furious. His crusade was cancelled. Constantinople was saved by words, not swords. But the union was a facade. The Byzantine clergy rejected it. The people despised it. Michael enforced it brutally. Bishops were imprisoned. Monks were tortured. His own sister denounced him. The empire was saved externally, torn apart internally. Michael didn't care. Survival justified everything. The Sicilian Vespers of 1282 vindicated Michael's strategy. A massacre of French in Sicily, orchestrated by Byzantine gold. Charles of Anjou's kingdom collapsed. The threat to Constantinople ended. Michael had won, through conspiracy, through bribery, through genius. He died that year, exhausted, hated, but victorious. Andronicus II, who succeeded, Michael's son, he immediately renounced church union. The clergy rejoiced, the people celebrated, but the diplomatic protection was gone. The empire was isolated again, and Andronicus was weak, intellectual, pious, but weak. The military was neglected. Too expensive, Andronicus decided. The navy was disbanded completely. Ships were sold, sailors dismissed. When pirates appeared, the empire had to hire foreign fleets, Genoese, Venetian, even Turkish. The humiliation was complete. The economy collapsed. The gold coinage was debased again. The hyperperon replaced the solidus, worth less, trusted less. Italian coins circulated freely. Venetian ducats, Florentine florins, foreign money in the Roman Empire, the symbolic surrender to economic reality. The Catalan Company arrived in 1303. Mercenaries, 6,500 veterans, hired to fight the Turks. They did. Successfully. Too successfully. They demanded higher pay, more privileges. When refused, they revolted, devastated Thrace, Macedonia, Greece for 7 years. Byzantine territory destroyed by Byzantine employees. Meanwhile, the Turks advanced, not the Seljuks. They were finished. The Ottomans now, a small beylik initially, under Osman, then Orhan. They took Prusa in 1326, made it Bursa, their capital. Nicaea fell in 1331, Nicomedia in 1337. Anatolia was lost, permanently this time. Civil war erupted in 1321. Andronicus III, the emperor's grandson, revolted. Young, military, popular, against his grandfather, old, peaceful, despised. The war lasted 7 years, destroyed what little remained. The empire tore itself apart while enemies watched, waited, advanced. Andronicus III won in 1328. He tried to restore the empire, some success, recovered Thessaly, Epirus. But the fundamental problems remained. No money, no army, no hope really. He died young in 1341. His son John V was 9. Another regency, another civil war. John Cantacuzenos seized power, the late emperor's friend, or so he claimed. The civil war lasted 6 years, 1341 to 1347, the most destructive yet. Both sides hired foreign troops, Turks, Serbs, Bulgarians. They ravaged Byzantine lands, took payment in territory. The empire shrank with each victory. The Black Death arrived in 1347, killed a third of Constantinople's population, maybe more. The economy collapsed completely. Trade stopped. Agriculture failed. Tax collection ceased. The empire became a city-state. Constantinople and its suburbs, nothing more really. Stefan Dusan of Serbia proclaimed himself Emperor of Serbs and Romans in 1346. The Serbs controlled more Byzantine territory than Byzantium. The Bulgarian Empire was resurgent. The Ottomans controlled Anatolia. The empire existed in name only, a glorious name, but just a name. John the Palaiologos finally ruled in 1354. After 13 years of civil war, he ruled for 37 years, saw the empire disappear. Piece by piece, watched helplessly, sometimes not helplessly, sometimes complicitly. He became an Ottoman vassal, paid tribute, provided troops, the Roman emperor serving Turkish sultans. The Ottomans crossed to Europe in 1354. An earthquake had destroyed Gallipoli's walls. They occupied it, never left. Europe was invaded. Thrace fell quickly. Adrianople in 1369 became Edirne, the Ottoman capital in Europe. Constantinople was surrounded, cut off, dependent on Ottoman mercy. John V went west in 1369, begging. To the Pope, to Venice, to Hungary, anyone who would help. He even converted to Catholicism. Personally, the Pope was pleased, but sent no help. Venice demanded islands. Hungary demanded submission. John returned empty-handed, humiliated. His son Andronikos imprisoned him, then was imprisoned himself. The family dysfunction continued. The Battle of Kosovo in 1389 destroyed Serbian power. The Ottomans won, sort of. Both rulers died, but the Ottomans recovered. The Serbs didn't. The last potential ally was gone. Constantinople stood alone, completely alone. Manuel II succeeded in 1391. John V's son, the most capable of the late emperors, intelligent, educated, diplomatic, but ruling what? Constantinople, a few islands, some Peloponnesian territories. The Ottoman Sultan controlled more Byzantine land than the Byzantine emperor. The situation was absurd. Bayezid besieged Constantinople in 1394. The siege lasted 8 years. Not a violent siege, a slow strangulation. The city starved. The population dropped to 40,000, maybe less. Manuel travelled to Western Europe, begging again. London, Paris, Rome, everywhere sympathy, nowhere substantial help. Then came miracle. Tamerlane invaded Anatolia, destroyed Bayezid at Ankara in 1402. The Ottoman Empire collapsed. Civil war between Bayezid's sons. Constantinople could breathe. The siege was lifted. The empire had 20 years' reprieve, the last reprieve. Manuel used the time well, rebuilt the walls, restored the economy somewhat, recovered some territory, even built. The Palace of Blakeney was expanded, the last Byzantine construction project, but he knew the truth. The empire was dying. He was managing its decline, with dignity, with grace, but still decline. The Ottomans recovered under Murad II, stronger than ever. The noose tightened again. Manuel became a monk in 1425. His son John VIII succeeded, competent but desperate. He tried everything. Another church union. The Council of Florence in 1439, the churches reunited. Officially, the Pope promised a crusade. It came. Was destroyed at Varna in 1444. The union collapsed. East and West separated. Finally, forever. Constantine XIV succeeded in 1449. The last emperor. A good soldier. A good man. He knew his fate. Accepted it. The Ottoman Sultan was now Mehmed II. Young. Brilliant. Ambitious. He wanted Constantinople. Would have it. Whatever the cost. Constantine V Palaiologos entered Constantinople in 1449. Not crowned by the Patriarch. The Church opposed him. He supported union with Rome. Desperation made him pragmatic. But coronation didn't matter. Everyone knew he was emperor, the last emperor, though nobody said it aloud. Constantinople was barely a city. 40,000 people, perhaps, in walls built for 1 million. Entire districts were farmland, gardens, ruins. The Venetian bailey wrote home describing vineyards inside the city. wheat fields. The Queen of Cities had become a rural town with magnificent walls. But what walls? The Theodosian walls still stood. Triple walls, 200 towers, a moat 60 feet wide. For 1,000 years they had protected Constantinople, never breached, never conquered, except by the Fourth Crusade's treachery. The walls were Constantinople's last asset, its only real asset. Constantine had perhaps 7,000 defenders, Greeks mostly, but also some Genoese, some Venetians, a few Catalans, volunteers who chose to die with the empire. Against them, Mehmed II assembled between 80 and 200,000. The numbers vary, but overwhelming regardless. Mehmed prepared methodically, built a fortress on the European shore. Anadolu Hisari already existed on the Asian side. Now Rumeli Hisari rose opposite. The Bosphorus was closed. Constantinople was isolated. Any ship that tried to pass was sunk or captured, its crew impaled. The message was clear. The Sultan had a secret weapon, a Hungarian engineer named Orban. He had offered his services to Constantine first. The emperor couldn't pay. Mehmed could. Orban built the largest cannon ever made, 27 feet long, firing stone balls weighing 600 kilograms. It took 60 oxen to pull, 3 hours to reload, but it could shatter walls. The siege began April 6th, 1453. Good Friday, ironically, or perhaps deliberately. Mehmed positioned his forces. The regular troops faced the land walls. The Bashi bazouks, irregular troops, were kept in reserve. The fleet, 70 ships, entered the Bosphorus. But the Golden Horn was blocked. That famous chain, still effective after centuries. Constantine's defenders were spread thin. Too few men for too many walls, but they fought brilliantly. The Genoese commander Justiniani led the land defence. The sailors defended the sea walls. Everyone who could hold a weapon was armed, including women, including children. The final stand. The bombardment was continuous, day and night. The great cannon fired 7 times daily. Each shot shook the entire city. Buildings collapsed far from the walls, but the ancient fortifications held, damaged, cracked, but standing. Byzantine engineering at its finest, even against gunpowder. Mehmed grew impatient. He ordered ships transported overland, around Galata, into the Golden Horn, 70 ships hauled on greased logs by thousands of men, overnight. Constantinople woke to find Ottoman ships in the Golden Horn, behind the chain. The protected harbour was protected no more. The defenders' morale crumbled, but not their resistance. Every assault was repelled. April 18th, April 20th, May 7th, May 12th. The Turks suffered thousands of casualties, the defenders dozens, but dozens they couldn't afford. Each loss was irreplaceable. Constantine knew the end was near. He attended liturgy in Hagia Sophia. May 28th, the last Christian service there, Greeks and Latins together, union achieved through desperation. The emperor received communion, said farewell without saying it. Everyone understood. This was the end. The final assault began at 1:30 a.m. May 29th, wave after wave. The irregulars first, to exhaust the defenders, then the Anatolian troops, then the Janissaries, the elite, fresh, disciplined, determined. The defenders fought desperately, held for hours. Then Justiniani was wounded, insisted on being evacuated. His Genoese followed. A gate was opened. The Turks poured through. Constantine saw the breach, threw off his imperial regalia, charged into the Turkish mass, disappeared. His body was never identified, never found. The last Roman emperor died as a common soldier, defending his city. The empire that had lasted 1,023 years ended, not with surrender, with defiance. The sack lasted 3 days, as was customary, but controlled. Mehmed wanted his new capital intact. Still, thousands died. Thousands more were enslaved. Hagia Sophia was looted, then converted to a mosque. The altar was destroyed. The mosaics were plastered over. The cross was replaced with the crescent. The transformation was complete. But Mehmed was not a destroyer. He was a conqueror. He saw himself as Caesar's successor. Caesari Rum, Caesar of Rome. He kept the Byzantine administration, the Greek officials, the tax system, the court ceremonies. The Ottoman Empire absorbed Byzantine governance, preserved it, transformed it. The ecumenical patriarch survived. Mehmed appointed Gennadios Skolarios, an anti-unionist. The church continued, under Ottoman protection, controlled, restricted, but surviving. The Byzantine faith outlasted the Byzantine state, still does. The liturgy of John Chrysostom is still sung, the theology of the Cappadocian still studied. Some Byzantine nobles fled west, to Venice, to Rome, to Spain. They brought manuscripts, Greek learning, ancient texts. The Renaissance was already beginning, but Byzantine refugees accelerated it. Teachers of Greek, copiers of Plato, preservers of Aristotle, the empire's final gift to the world. Others fled to Russia. Moscow claimed to be the Third Rome. The Russian Tsars claimed Byzantine succession, married Byzantine princesses, adopted Byzantine ceremonies, the double-headed eagle, the title of Caesar, Tsar. The idea of universal Orthodox empire transformed, Russified, but Byzantine in origin. The Morea held out briefly, the despotate of Morea. Constantine's brothers ruled there, Demetrios and Thomas. They surrendered in 1460. Trebizond lasted until 1461, the last Byzantine state. Its fall was anticlimactic. The empire had already ended. These were just footnotes. The Byzantine Empire lasted longer than any other empire in history, from 330 to 1453. 1,123 years. It preserved classical civilization through the Dark Ages, transmitted it to the Renaissance. Without Byzantium, we would have lost Plato, Aristotle, Euclid, Homer, the foundations of Western thought. Byzantine law shaped the world. The corpus juris civilis became the basis of European legal systems. Civil law, canon law, international law, all derive from Justinian's code, modified, adapted. But Byzantine in origin, every time a contract is signed, a will executed, a court convened, Byzantine legal principles operate. The Orthodox Church remains Byzantine. 300 million Orthodox Christians today, Russians, Greeks, Serbs, Romanians, Bulgarians, Georgians, all worship in the Byzantine tradition. The liturgy, the theology, the monasticism, the icons, all Byzantine. The empire died, the faith lived. Byzantine art transformed world culture. The Dome of St. Paul's in London, St. Mark's in Venice, Westminster Cathedral, all Byzantine-inspired. Icons influenced Renaissance painting. Giotto learned from Byzantine masters. El Greco was Byzantine, literally. Born in Crete when it was still culturally Byzantine. The Cyrillic alphabet is Byzantine, created by Byzantine missionaries, used by hundreds of millions today. Russians, Ukrainians, Bulgarians, Serbs. Every Cyrillic letter traces back to Constantinople, to Cyril and Methodius, to the Byzantine mission to civilize through literacy. Byzantine diplomacy created modern statecraft. The balance of power, playing enemies against each other, using gold instead of blood, treaties as weapons, marriage as alliance. Every foreign ministry today uses Byzantine methods, perhaps unknowingly, but using them nonetheless. The Byzantine economy pioneered capitalism, banks, letters of credit, insurance, joint stock companies, international trade agreements, quality controls, consumer protection. All existed in Constantinople centuries before Venice, before Florence, before London. The Byzantines invented the commercial practices we consider modern. Byzantine military science influenced warfare for centuries. Greek fire inspired all incendiary weapons. The theme system influenced feudalism, but improved it, made it sustainable. Byzantine tactical manuals were studied by Muslim generals, by Crusader knights, by Renaissance condottieri, the Strategicon of Maurice, the Tactica of Leo, still studied in military academies. Byzantine scholarship preserved ancient knowledge. Without Byzantine scribes, 90% of ancient Greek literature would be lost. They copied, recopied, preserved, commented, transmitted every classical text we have passed through Byzantine hands, often multiple times, each copy an act of civilization. The Renaissance began with Byzantine refugees. After 1453, Greek scholars flooded west, bringing manuscripts, teaching languages, opening minds. Bessarion's library became Venice's. Plethon taught in Florence, inspired the Platonic Academy. The Byzantine Empire's death fertilized the Renaissance's birth. Byzantine architecture revolutionized building. The pedentive dome, the cross-and-square church, the centrally planned space. Hagia Sophia inspired countless imitations. The Blue Mosque, the Suleymaniye, St. Peter's original plan. Even the US Capitol dome owes debts to Byzantine innovation. Byzantine ceremony created court ritual. The elaborate protocols, the formal hierarchies, the symbolic gestures. Every European court copied Byzantine practices. The Holy Roman Emperor, the French king, the English monarchy, all borrowed Byzantine ceremonial, crowns, orbs, sceptres, purple robes, all Byzantine symbols of power. Byzantine medicine advanced healing. The first hospitals, systematic medical education, surgical procedures, pharmaceutical preparations. Paula Vagina's textbooks were used for centuries. Islamic medicine built on Byzantine foundations. Western medicine rediscovered them in translation. Byzantine technology spread worldwide. Silk production escaped China through Byzantine espionage. Spread to Europe through Byzantine workshops. The fork came to Europe from Byzantium. The pipe organ, the mechanical clock, automata, all Byzantine innovations or transmissions. Byzantine theology shaped Christianity. The Trinity doctrine, the nature of Christ, the role of Mary, icon theology, mystical theology, all developed in Byzantine councils, Byzantine debates, Byzantine monasteries. Western and Eastern Christianity both depend on Byzantine theological foundations. Byzantine women had rights unusual for the Middle Ages, property ownership, business management, imperial rule. The West restricted women more, the Islamic world too. Byzantine women weren't equal, but they were freer, more powerful, more visible. The tradition influenced surrounding cultures. Byzantine multiculturalism provided a model. Greeks, Armenians, Slavs, Arabs, all served the empire. Advancement by merit was possible, not common, but possible. A peasant could become emperor. Several did. This social mobility was rare in medieval societies. Byzantine urban planning influenced cities, wide streets, public fountains, sewage systems, hospitals, orphanages, hostels, markets, all regulated, all planned. When medieval Europe was rural, Constantinople was urban, sophisticated, complex, a model copied when Europe reurbanized. The Byzantine imperial idea persisted, the notion of universal Christian empire. The Holy Roman Empire claimed it, the Russian Empire claimed it, even the Ottoman Empire absorbed it, the Sultan as Caesar, Istanbul as the eternal city, the dream of universal rule. Byzantine in conception. Byzantine book production preserved literature. The minuscule script, more efficient than uncial, allowed longer texts in smaller books, cheaper, portable. The codex replaced the scroll. Byzantine innovations. Without them, books would have remained luxury items. Knowledge would have stayed elite. Byzantine agriculture fed Europe. Crop rotation techniques, irrigation systems, the moldboard plough, new crops, silkworms, sugar production, cotton cultivation, all spread from Byzantium. The agricultural revolution had Byzantine roots. Byzantine navigation advanced sailing, the lateen sail, improved astrolabes, portolan charts, maritime law. The Rhodian sea law governed Mediterranean shipping for centuries. Venetian maritime dominance built on Byzantine foundations. Genoa, too. The maritime republics were Byzantine students. Byzantine music influenced both East and West. The eight-mode system, musical notation, polyphony's origins, liturgical chant. The Western Gregorian chant has Byzantine roots. Eastern Orthodox singing is purely Byzantine. Islamic religious music shows Byzantine influence. Byzantine gardens inspired paradise, the formal garden, geometric patterns, water features, symbolic plants. Islamic gardens copied Byzantine models, the Alhambra, the Taj Mahal gardens. Even Versailles owes debts to Byzantine garden design. Byzantine cuisine spread through Europe and Asia. Garum became Italian colatura. Byzantine sweets became Turkish delight. The fork, table manners, dining ceremonies, all Byzantine exports. Fine dining as theatre began in Constantinople. Byzantine games entertained the world. Chess came through Byzantium. Polo, board games. The Hippodrome's chariot races inspired medieval tournaments. Sports as political expression. The blues and greens prefigured modern sports fanatics. Byzantine linguistics preserved Greek. Without Byzantium, ancient Greek would be as dead as Hittite, but Byzantine scholars maintained it, evolved it. Modern Greek descends directly from Byzantine Greek, a living link to Homer, to Plato, to the Gospels. Byzantine iconography created visual language, how to depict Christ, Mary, saints, angels, the hand positions, the colour symbolism, gold backgrounds, reverse perspective, all Byzantine conventions, still used, still recognised, still powerful. Byzantine monasticism shaped religious life, the communal monastery, the hermit tradition, the stylites, Mount Athos, still functioning, still Byzantine in practice, the monastic rules, the daily offices, the spiritual disciplines, all Byzantine creations or modifications. Byzantine charity pioneered social services, state hospitals, orphanages, homes for the elderly, hostels for travellers, all free, all state-funded. The welfare state has Byzantine precedents. The notion that the state should care for citizens, Byzantine. Byzantine education preserved classical learning. The trivium and quadrivium, the 7 liberal arts, grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, astronomy. The curriculum that educated Europe came from Byzantium. The university system has Byzantine roots. Byzantine timekeeping organized the day, the liturgical hours, the church calendar, dating from Christ's birth, the 7-day week reinforced, mechanical clocks in churches, time as divine order, Byzantine concepts, still structuring our lives. Byzantine attitudes toward power influenced political thought. The emperor as God's vice-regent, power as divine delegation, but also limited by law, by tradition, by church. The tension between absolute and limited power, Byzantine in origin, still debated. Byzantine apocalypticism influenced religious thought. The idea that history has direction, purpose, an end. The last emperor myths, the prophecies, the sense of decline and fall, all Byzantine themes influencing how we see history, how we understand change. Byzantine resilience provided a model, how to survive, how to endure, how to maintain civilization against odds. For 1,000 years, Byzantium faced crisis, invasion, plague, civil war. It survived through adaptation, through institutions, through faith, through sheer determination. The Byzantine Empire ended in 1453. But Byzantine civilization didn't end. It transformed, it spread, it influenced, it still does. Every Orthodox church is a piece of Byzantium, every civil law code, every diplomatic negotiation, every preserved ancient text. Byzantium lives in these. Constantinople became Istanbul, but the city's bones are Byzantine, the walls, the cisterns, the foundations. Hagia Sophia still stands, converted, reconverted, but standing. A testament to Byzantine genius, to Byzantine ambition, to Byzantine faith. The last Byzantine emperor died defending his city. No surrender, no negotiation, just duty. That was Byzantine too. The idea that some things matter more than life, that civilization must be defended, that history judges our choices. Constantine X understood this, died for it. We live in a world Byzantium-shaped, often without knowing it. The Byzantine Empire was the bridge between ancient and modern, between East and West, between pagan and Christian, between chaos and order. For 1,000 years it held that bridge, transmitted civilization across it. That was Byzantium's achievement, not just survival, though that was remarkable, not just preservation, though that was essential, but transmission, transformation, the taking of ancient wisdom, adding medieval experience, creating something new, something lasting, something that still influences us. The Byzantine Empire is gone, but we're all a little Byzantine when we use a fork, sign a contract, enter a domed building, read Plato, worship in an ancient liturgy, negotiate instead of fighting. We're following Byzantine precedents, using Byzantine innovations, living in a Byzantine-influenced world. The empire of Constantine and Justinian, of Heraclius and Basileus, of the Komnenoi and Paleologoi, it deserves remembering, not as a decline from Rome, not as a prelude to the Ottomans, but as itself, 1,000-year civilization, the guardian of classical heritage, the creator of medieval culture, the bridge to the modern world. That's the Byzantine legacy. Not failure, success, not ending, transformation, not death. Immortality through influence. The empire is gone. The civilization lives in law, in art, in faith, in the very idea of civilized life. Byzantium endures.